Our Decision 2014 coverage of the Delaware Attorney General's contest continues with the Democratic candidate, Matt Denn. Now, you know him as the current Lieutenant Governor, so Matt, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I want to ask, why do you think you should succeed Beau Biden as Attorney General?
Well, I have a proven record in state government of getting things done in the offices that I've held. I was the state's insurance commissioner for 4 years, and I think from the view of a lot of people, really got that office pointed in the right direction and doing some good things. And over the last 6 years as lieutenant governor, some of the things that I've come on this show and talked about in terms of getting more programs in place for students with disabilities, for academically advanced students, trying to do some things for small business. I can go through that. We played our interview from 2 years ago. I could probably go through that checklist and show you that I got the things done that I said I would. So I'm very focused in this campaign on violent crime and our homicide rate in the state, and I would expect to bring the same type of success there that I've been able to bring in other government offices. And I think the other reason is that, you know, I got a pretty wide experience as an attorney in the state, both in private practice and in public service, and I think that the breadth and the scope of my experience just as a practicing attorney is going to be a real asset if I get the opportunity to be Attorney General.
I want to go over some of the approaches on the issues that you are running on. Crime, for example, you mentioned. You're calling for partnerships with local law enforcement agencies, a combination of vigorous prosecution, and then also addressing the root causes of some of the crime problems, particularly in Wilmington. So how does that help a place like Wilmington address the issues of gun violence?
It's a great question. I mean, the first set of steps that you mentioned, traditional law enforcement steps, we know that those work because we're not the first state or the first city to have had a homicide problem or a violent crime problem, and we have literally decades of evidence from other places around the country that have had similar problems to the ones that we're having now, what they have done and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And some of the things that have worked other places we're not doing here, and they involve having law enforcement officers from multiple jurisdictions out of their cars, visibly on the streets of the neighborhoods where these things are happening, interacting both with neighbors who live there, the 99% of the people who live in those neighborhoods who are law-abiding, who don't want the violence, and forming relationships with them, but also dealing with the folks who are out there who shouldn't be, making sure the people who are out there who have guns don't have them, making sure that people aren't out there with drugs who shouldn't be out there. So that's a big part of it, and again, that's been a critical component of what's been successful other places that we're not yet doing here. And the Attorney General, as the chief law enforcement officer in the state, has the ability, and I think really the responsibility, to try to make that happen, to bring together these different jurisdictions that right now aren't really working together in the city in particular, and making that happen. And there's, you know, we could go through, we have a 7-point, just on the law enforcement front, a 7-point plan that's on our website, that most of which do involve steps that have worked in other states. The other half of it that you made reference to is the underlying causes of the crime, and that's not something that we will necessarily see the results of tomorrow or a week from now, but over the long haul, if we want to have the violence down, we have to do those things, and those involve steps like getting our substance abuse epidemic under control, dealing with our recidivism rate, the very high number of people we have who are released from prison and commit new crimes and are back in again within 3 years, and the absence of a sufficient number of after-school and summer programs for some of our juveniles. Those are all areas where statistically, empirically, if you do them well, you see a reduction in crime, and we have not done them enough yet in Delaware.
Another part of your platform is safer schools and more to protect children. I know that there's an initiative to combat bullying and in particular cyberbullying. So what more would you do?
Well, I think you were actually at the press conference we had at a middle school a couple of years ago, where Attorney General Biden and I, unveiled the first steps that we were taking in that direction. And a lot of what we've been doing on the bullying front since then is trying to enforce some of those new statutes and regulations that we put in place. And we're seeing some results. One of the things that we did that we thought would be effective, and it has been, is that we told some of the schools, we need you to start contacting the parents of kids who are doing bullying, contacting the parents of kids who have been the victims, which really wasn't happening. And we started auditing schools to make sure that we knew who was doing it and who wasn't. And we've been very public about telling parents in the districts where schools that aren't doing it that they're not doing it. And we were seeing schools being much more conscientious about communicating with parents about the bullying issues, which is very, that's critical. A lot of the dealing with bullying happens at home and involves parents and other guardians telling their kids what's right and wrong in school, and that's not possible if they don't know what's happening in the school. So it sounds like a simple thing, but it's something that wasn't happening. And the cyberbullying, as you mentioned, that's the new frontier of bullying, and we've put some tools now in schools' hands where they can actually enforce some cyberbullying rules where previously they weren't able to.
So continuing to build on those.
Yeah, I think I think of the legal and regulatory steps have been taken, and now what we need to do is to follow up on that and really enforce the rules that we put in place, which are really on the cutting edge in terms of what's out there in the rest of the country.
Now, Democrats have a large registration advantage in the state, but Republicans, including Mike Castle, have been trying to cast doubt on your campaign by saying you should finish out the term that you were elected for. What do you say?
I think people, I don't hear that from anybody other than Republicans who are looking for something to say. And I actually have done very well every time I've run with Republican voters as well. I think people are focused on problems and they want problems solved. They don't really care about the political chatter. And so when people come up to me in public, what they talk to me about is, what are you going to do about the violent crime problem? What are you going to do about the homicides? Nobody talks to me about the political insider stuff. So I think that what I'm focused on is we have a problem that needs to get solved. There's an opportunity to run for this office and be really in the center of trying to solve that problem. And I think that when people look back at my success in dealing with other problems, that Democrats and Republicans, as they have in the past, are going to give me the opportunity to step in and try to make some real movement on this violent crime problem as well.
But why did you decide to run with 2 years left? I mean, and how much did Beau Biden's decision to run for governor in 2016 play into your decision, if at all?
Well, the decision I had to make came in April when Attorney General Biden decided not to run for re-election. Obviously, if he was on the ballot still, then I wouldn't be running. But when he decided not to run, I had to make a decision. And it wasn't an easy decision because I love being lieutenant governor. It's a terrific job. I'm privileged to have it. And as we talked about at the outset, I think we've gotten some very concrete things done. So for me, the issue was there's this looming problem that hasn't yet been addressed that's really causing incredible pain and chaos for the families that are in the middle of it. And will running for this office, give me the opportunity to do something about that? And the conclusion that I came to was yes, it would. And I'm looking forward to to stepping in and helping to solve that problem. But it wasn't an easy decision for me because I very much enjoy being lieutenant governor. I think it's been a real privilege to do the job. And so it was a tough decision, but I'm convinced the right one.
There's been some speculation, though, that, and I've heard this from your Republican opponent, and maybe this is just politics, that you're using this office as a waiting room for something bigger. And there's this question of, you're running for this office because if you finished out your lieutenant governor term, there would be 2 years where maybe you'd be out of politics altogether. Any response to that?
I was getting a little dizzy just trying to follow the whole question. No, I intend to serve 4 years as Attorney General. And again, I just don't think that people focus on these political things. They see a problem, they want the problem dealt with. And for me, that's what this is an opportunity to deal with the problem. And I've been an attorney for 24 or 25 years, and I think I've been in elective office for 10 of those years. So I've spent more of my career as an attorney out of elective office than in, and if that ever happened again, that's fine too. I really enjoy being an attorney, but my focus is, if I get elected Attorney General, trying to deal with our violent crime problem.
Now, every Attorney General sets a tone for their office and their administration. So, for example, Beau Biden's is protecting children. What tone would you want to set?
Well, protecting vulnerable populations, children, senior citizens, Delawareans with disabilities, that's part of the agenda. I think that in terms of a focus, the major focus, what I'm going to wake up concerned about every day when I come to work is dealing with the violent crime problem. And if we are able, looking back in hindsight, to see that we've taken some of those steps that I've laid out to deal with the violent crime problem, then I'll look back and say, job well done. And I'm very confident that we'll be able to do some of those things because, again, when I've had the opportunity to serve in elective office previously in Delaware, and I've come out and said I was going to work on things, I have, and there have been some real positive results to show for it.
Okay, Matt Denn, Democratic candidate for Attorney General, thank you so much for your time. WHYY will televise a debate between all of the candidates for Attorney General in a couple of weeks.